And welcome to Let Them Talk. I'm Paul DiRienzo, your host, and we have another great show in store for you. And this time we're going to talk about Brooklyn politics. And it relates to people actually everywhere because I guess it's a citywide program. And it's the reason that we have Miss Saunders, the woman whose photograph is behind me, is because we're going to be talking about her and how the city took away her house, which was paid for, a beautiful brownstone, and she had no idea that that's what they were doing, that they took away. She went, by dumb luck, she discovered she didn't have a house. And they turned it over to this organization called UHAB, I guess it was. We'll learn more about the details. But the fact is that there's this program out there that the city uses to take over what they call distressed properties. And sometimes the properties aren't distressed in the slightest. And the person still loses their property and they can't get it back. Has this happened to you? Has this happened to you? My word. All right, so here we are with my guests from Kings County Politics, the website. Steve Witt, who I've known for many years. Oh, there we go. Let's shake hands. And Kelly Mena,
yes,
who is the editor, the senior reporter for the website, and she's the lead person in doing this story. Well, both of you guys do it together. You can argue about who gets the intellectual credit, but this is an amazing story. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what this program is, and then after we get down what the program is, we can talk about how you came to do a story about it.
Right. Okay, so I guess I'll start us out. So the program really is, it's called it's under the Department of Housing Preservation and Development, also known as HPD. It's called the Third Party Transfer Program, also known as TPT. It's a program in which the city started many years ago in the 70s, 80s, when there were distressed properties across the city, and really nobody wanted to take care of the properties. And so the city was selling them off for $1 in some of the areas. For that reason, these nonprofits were taking over the properties and really fixing them up and making sure that they were livable and habitable and they were safe for people to live in. Well, fast forward to now, and now the city kind of is slowly but surely using the program to seize properties through foreclosure judgments that aren't necessarily distressed. And for the city, the threshold for distress is either you have too many Department of Building violations, you have property tax arrears, or you have some other form of violations on your home that then triggers you into this program that then can possibly lead to foreclosure and then the city seizing your deed and then giving it to a third party, also known as a sponsor, and it's now nonprofits and for-profits developers. So we're going to now lead to where we kind of come into this story.
Right. So this amazes me. It's hard to believe that it's possible for the city to take away your property and then you're left with a situation. And maybe describe this to me, Steve. Maybe we'll throw it to you. How is it possible for the city to take away your property and then you can't get it back?
I think what happens is the city has a foreclosure, and people fall behind in their property taxes, and HPD gets involved. And where I think happens is that, I'm not sure the question, Paul. I'm sorry, I feel befuddled there. Huh?
Yeah, right. Well, why can't they take away? I mean, I thought private property in America is sacred.
Yeah, private property should be sacred.
But it's not in this case.
No, it's not in this case.
And we're talking about the person behind us whose photograph is Miss Sanders, who had no problems at all with her apartment.
What happened, the way we came into the story is I got a call from a source.
Yeah.
And he said, Steve, you got to come down here. There's this woman, she's 74, and they took her property. And I was like, who took their property? The city took the property.
So you had the same reaction I just had.
Yeah, and I was like, he said, you got to come down here. I'm like, we're doing a lot of stories. Are you sure there's a story? And he's like, come down here, look at her paperwork. So I went down, and it was Mrs. Saunders, and I walked in. The brownstone's immaculately kept, and it's on one of these blocks in Crown Heights, which is gentrified. All of a sudden, you walk down the block, there's white people on their bicycles drinking coffee on the stoop, and you go to this house, and she bought the house, I think in '85 for $25,000. Back when it was the hood, nobody wanted these houses. She's a retired nurse, and she's owned the house free and clear. They put all their life savings, her husband, her son, the house was immaculately kept. I mean, you walk in, new kitchen, the brownstone was beautiful, the steps, and her son is sitting at the kitchen table and saying, I don't understand it. They said that we didn't pay our property taxes and it's a distressed property and there's nothing distressed about this. And we got a flyer under the door that said, for now on, we own your house and pay us rent. And he's like, pay us rent? We've owned this building for 40 years. And now...
How do they establish the rent? How much was this so-called rent?
They didn't give them the rent. What they said is, we're going to be in contact with you. For now on, don't pay rent anymore. They thought they were renters and not owners. And it's like a 3-family brownstone. And her son lives there. They have a couple of students upstairs. You know, and they always
So they're the owners.
They're the owners. And they actually got a thing, for now on, you don't have to pay rent anymore. And they were like, we never paid rent. We own the building. So I looked through the paperwork, and I'm like, something's wrong here. There's something wrong. And I'm looking through the papers. The guy's looking through the papers. And after a half hour, 40 minutes, I called our photographer. I'm like, and I called the city council guy, Rob Cornegie. And I'm like, you got to do something. These people are losing their house. He showed me canceled checks. They were up on their property taxes. They were up on their water bill. And for some reason, it wasn't recorded with the Department of Finance. So what I determined as a reporter in writing it was there was kind of a scam going where people were paying their property taxes. It wasn't recorded. And HPD would come in, and they have a pool of nonprofits and for-profits that they use. And it turns out a lot of these nonprofits were like old nonprofits from the 70s and 80s when there was a lot of abandoned buildings. And it's now they have a bureaucracy where they need a job, they need to do something. And her building is worth $1.2 million now. So when she bought it, it was 25 grand. And now this same building's worth a lot of money.
And the city walks in. To me, it sounds like the story of the young African-American person with a professional job who's driving home in his brand new vehicle of any make or model, you know, that he bought with his own money, and the cop pulls him over and he says, why are you pulling me over, officer? And he says, why are you driving this car?
Right.
How could you have this car?
Right. And it should be noted, too, that in this particular case, the city actually came out publicly and stated that it was a clerical error, and that's why she ended up without the ownership of her home, which of all of the buildings that we found a part of this program, she's the only one so far that they've publicly acknowledged should have never been part of the third-party transfer program, and somehow some clerical error
on her
part, because they didn't take responsibility on her part.
She's been paying her property taxes for 30 years, and they're like, oh, she paid it to the wrong person.
That doesn't really work. Some clerical error. What clerical error?
Right.
And
they usually have to come up with what clerical error was.
And they didn't. They haven't said. They just said that it was on her part. She put it onto the wrong property. She gave us the wrong property. This is a woman who's been paying her taxes for decades, and all of a sudden she got it wrong on the 40th year. I mean, the chances of that are so slim.
Let's journalistic question. Were you able to trace back to when they stopped registering her property tax payments?
We have to look at the paperwork, but it wasn't. The weird thing is they weren't in foreclosure. Like some of these people, they're warned they're in foreclosure. She was behind, I think the water taxes was like $40,000. The property tax was just a year or so behind. And he immediately paid it. He produced the son.
Oh, yeah.
The actual receipt that I paid this, and they weren't aware of any foreclosure proceeding.
They sent a bill saying, you owe us this much money, and he responded by saying, here's the canceled checks.
Right. Well, they didn't even notify him. He didn't know anything. The city, when you talk to HPD, it's like, we contacted these people 70 times, and that's what they'll tell you. But every one of these 4 cases we found, they put flyers under the door. There's no certified mail. There's no paper trail. There's no phone call mail. There's no email trail of anything of that set. And then when they took it in foreclosure, this was part of 66 properties that were taken in one foreclosure. And no name was listed. It was just a property lot number. They took 60 properties, HPD, to Brooklyn Supreme Court, and they took it in one swoop of a foreclosure.
And her apartment was in that list?
Yes.
Her building, her entire building was
her
on that
building,
list.
yeah.
Yes, correct.
Right.
All taken at once.
Did she get it back?
She still, at the moment, has not gotten it back. She's in talks with the city to get her deed back. But
Oh, they didn't make her pay more money?
You know what?
No, they didn't make her pay, but they're.
To get your house back? We call that the African American tax. You just learned that.
It should.
You know, the sad thing is, and I like Mrs. Saunders a lot. She's a very nice lady. She's connected. You know, even my source, they called me. She's a longtime civic person. She knew politicians. And it was the wrong person to take that property because she knew people, right?
Right.
And with all due respect, if you know someone, it always helps. We found 3 other people on the same list, and they're not getting it back. You know, they're in court in various stages of court.
And did they have a similar situation where they paid? How
Yes.
did you find when you look? So, what percentage were people who really were in distressed properties that HPD was working with them to get their properties back? Which percentage were people who unfairly, by some bureaucratic tangle, lost their land?
I was going to say, sorry to cut you off. The thing about this foreclosure proceeding, because we have no names, it's almost like we also have to wait for some people to come forward because we can only look at lots and names, but then after that, we just have to keep on going back to the property. But just because you go to a property doesn't mean...
You have to actually go to the place and knock on the door.
and knock on the door because it's only addresses and lot numbers. There are no names specified in any of these
So
documents.
where are the places that, let's talk a little bit about what you guys do. Kings County Politics, right?
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
That's your website. Tell us a little bit about what that is.
We cover the people, politics, and policies that govern Brooklyn. I'm a longtime journalist. I started as a street musician, and I wrote about street music, and that's how I know you, Paul. And then
How many years? Like 30 years? We know
Yeah.
each other? So Thomas
And
Park, right?
I moved upstate,
Yeah.
and then I parlayed that in the newsroom of the Times Herald Record, which was a daily Dow Jones. And then I worked for a weekly as a staff reporter. Then I came back to Brooklyn. I worked for 10 years as a staff reporter for Courier Life, which was bought out by News Corp, and I worked for them. And then I took a buyout, and then I worked for an African American paper for 5 years. And you know, when I started in mainstream journalism, not street music journalism, the buzzword was community journalism. And when I started Kings County Politics, I always felt community journalism worked, but it would be better to do community journalism from a political angle.
Yeah.
So if you cover the people, the politics, and the policies that govern, you're doing community journalism, and you don't cover community boards because people think community boards are part of politics. But they're not really. What's part of politics is local Democratic and Republican clubs. Because if you look who works for politicians, they don't come out of community boards. They come out of the political clubs. They get jobs, you know, liaison, because they're the people getting the petition signed, doing the groundwork, so you kind of owe them a job once you get elected. So I figured let's cover the people, politics, and policies that govern Brooklyn. Now, a lot of people know me because I've been in the game a long time, so I have some deep sources in Brooklyn. And then a story like this involves government and policies.
Right.
I see. Right, it does.
I
It
mean,
sure does.
and not to mention, doesn't involve government, but it involves so many different levels and so many different city agencies that are really, I don't even know what to say, dropping the ball or refusing to accept that there is an error here and it needs to be addressed.
I can sense in talking, we've talked a lot about this now, and I feel it too, sort of like flabbergastedness about this whole thing, that this actually is happening, because you can't imagine how somebody who's done all the right things could, something as drastic as losing your home.
I mean, and these are people who, the thing about it is I, in my belief, believe that it's a targeted kind of system now, because all the people that have come forward publicly have been of minority background, are older age, bought their homes many years ago. I mean,
Owned it free and clear.
Owned it free and clear, so they have no mortgage left on it.
Yeah.
And now we're on fixed income and are retired. So really, they're one of the most vulnerable subsets of the community. So it's very hard for them to fight back. And they're used to a system that's kind of old and ancient. They're used to going down, paying for their mortgage, holding somebody to their word, and that's all they know, you know?
Right, they go in there, give them a check, and then get a receipt and go home.
Go home.
Put
That's
it in
what
a box somewhere. And that's the end
exactly,
of
and
it.
that's what these are
That's how
all all
do
these,
it.
that's how they're all used to it. They
Yeah.
have no idea that you can go online and look it up and all these things are on there. Like just doing those simple things, they are used to these routines. So I feel like it's definitely a targeted attack on certain neighborhoods and groups of people.
We found that a lot of these 60 properties, 66 are central Brooklyn, rapidly gentrifying neighborhoods, areas of community of color, you know. And where Kelly did, like I got the initial story, and then all of a sudden we got 3 other calls from other property owners, and Kelly helped. She dug.
People just had the same problem, sort of calling you because of this.
Right.
So this is unbelievable. So, okay, so you found a KCP, the story walked in the door, and then more people came in as soon as you started reporting it.
Right.
And then you discovered there was this program. What is this program about? I know we might have talked about it a little bit, but let's revisit. What is the purpose? Do you know anything about the history of the program, when it came to be, what its purpose is, or what have you, Kelly?
I would say, so initially the goal of the program was to retain affordable and low to moderate income housing. It started back, unfortunately, during the crack epidemic when a lot of people didn't want to live in certain areas due to the rapid epidemic of drugs going around neighborhoods. These were basically the hood. These were highly African and Latino neighborhoods that people didn't want to live in. So they thought, okay, let's give them to these nonprofits, let them kind of take care of it because these tenants need help, people need someplace to live, and we're going to give it to them. And then
to manage the buildings.
To manage the building and
keep them
upkeep
running,
it. Yeah, so that the people can live
HPD will
with
say it's for the tenants.
Right, and I was going to say, now they're calling it a tenant program, which is kind of ironic to me because that's exactly what they're doing, is turning all these homeowners into tenants.
Right.
So now it's called a tenant program, a city tenant program, and it's to protect tenants from bad actors, which are bad landlords who use harassment and all these other tactics to try to either get people out of buildings or just choose to not take care of their buildings.
Right.
But now it's really turned into something totally different. It started with good intentions, but it seems now that it just is something that they aren't able to control.
And what else is aggravating is de Blasio's, his
Yeah,
needs
say,
to show he's created affordable housing. So like there's one property, there's 15 tenants where they're going to displace them and then move in 15 tenants. So in de Blasio's we've created 15 units of new affordable housing.
By evicting the 15.
Exactly.
Evicting the 15. They don't count the minus, they just count the plus.
Well, they're because they have the level of income that's quite high. I mean, they're talking about. I mean, times have not changed that much from our days at Tompkins Square Park. If you want to fix up your building and get out all the people who have absolutely no money and no hope of ever getting money, put them in a homeless shelter, and then you put people who at least have a $10 an hour job in there, and and then see we've fixed this neighborhood.
Exactly.
Of course, the problem comes down to what about all the homeless people who don't? But this isn't even that.
Right. This is kind of one of those factors playing into homelessness.
Right.
Yeah. And
well, let's talk about how the city, because back in the shadow days we used to write. I mean, that was the one thing during the Tompkins Square Park days before you were born, when we used to argue and talk about the city creating homelessness.
Right.
In order to move poor people out of inner city areas and replace them with a new gentry, and then move these people into shelters around the far distant areas of the city.
There's relationships. The other thing that must be noted, that if you're taking Black and Hispanic people's property that they bought for like dollars, and now it's worth over millions of dollars, that one of the big arguments, and this is why we've gotten so much support from the Black and Hispanic community, is intergenerational wealth. Is wealth. Most white people, they might not have millions, but if their family owns a house and the parents die, that could be a couple $100,000. It gives, or $1 million, and that intergenerational wealth gives people a head start in life.
Right.
So now you have a woman like Miss Saunders. She's got a son, working class job. She's getting older. He's got a property worth $1.2 million.
Right, and that's creating what you call the intergenerational wealth.
So when you take these properties from completely Black-owned properties or Hispanic-owned properties where they own something worth a couple $1 million now, you're killing intergenerational wealth. You're literally cutting it off at the knees.
move somewhere else, get away from this expensive area where we could sell. Yeah,
Right.
I see. Now, what are some of the groups, these organizations you were talking about that actually that have their roots in the 70s and in the 80s, but have now seem to be doing? You mentioned UHAB and some other ones.
Right.
What are some of those groups? What is their role? What are their role in this?
I was going to say Steve will probably be better suited for this, but there's UHAB, which is also known as the Urban Homesteading, Urban Homesteading Assistance Board. There's the Fifth Avenue Committee, which is out of Park Slope, or UHAB is out of Wall Street.
Brooklyn.
Yes, Fifth Avenue. UHAB is out of Wall Street. And then there's also Bridge Street Development Corporation, which is on that list. Just to preface, this list is a nonprofit and for-profit developer list that is somehow some special list that HPD doesn't want to give us. They don't tell us how they vet these non-for-profits, how they make it onto the list. They're just ready to go, ready to take these properties and be the new owners of them. And then I'll just let Steve talk more about
And what do they do with them when they become the new owners of people's homes?
Well, here's what happens. The first thing is it triggers that all the property taxes, the water taxes, any kind of building violations go away. So now they own something, no mortgage, free and clear, right? And they're given millions of dollars in subsidies to renovate it. And there's a lot of money in renovations. So if there is tenants, the first thing they tell the tenants is, this is going to need a gut renovation. They bring in their own architects, their own engineers, and they tell the people, look, you'll get a chance to move back in, but we got to put on a new roof, we got a new... And
that recently happened in Chinatown. I work with the Chinatown Working Group, and they've been here, and people got in through heavy-duty protesting, non-stop protesting. But they came in, basically evicted them, say we have to do a gut rehab. They didn't take it lying down.
Yeah.
The tenants, they camped out at HPD headquarters, and they protested, and they've protested. Believe me, they ripped the doors off the hinges, and they pushed and shoved little old ladies. It was amazing, but they finally let them back in. But they didn't for one second think that was just because they said they were going to let them back in. They were.
Oh, no. You can't. When they say we have to gut renovate and we're going to let you back in, you should not even leave. Just stay there.
That's what happened in Chinatown. They had to drag them out, and then they just refused to stop protesting.
Yeah, these gut
until they moved them
renovations
back in.
is a way these nonprofits can get millions of dollars. And so, and once you have millions of dollars and you're doing this work, then money kind of falls through the cracks.
Why would you rent it back to somebody with no money?
Exactly.
When you just fixed up the building.
Exactly.
We could get somebody paying $2,000-3,000 a month rent for a little tiny space like this studio, right?
It is true. And then that's the other part. They say non-for-profit and for-profits, and they say that these people want to help with low to moderate income, but they're developers at the end of the day. And development only grows through money. And the only way to get money is to fix something up, have somebody new with more income come in and pay for it. And that's the way they kind of keep on working their way through the borough, kind of. And that's what's happening. And the truth of the matter is that this last round of foreclosures happened in places like East New York, Brownsville, Bedford-Stuyvesant, and Crown Heights. There was nowhere on that list, none of the properties that we found that were in Prospect Heights, Brooklyn Heights, Park Slope. Everybody falls back financially at some point on something, even if it's something simple as you miss 1 month of rent. So for them to just claim that, these are the only houses that have property arrears is kind of completely just not possible. It's just not mathematically possible.
Modern day version of slum clearance.
Basically,
but
yeah.
it's government run, which is the scary part. They
Which has that bureaucratic power.
Yes.
Right, that Miss Saunders having so much trouble fighting against it, even though she's absolutely right on everything.
Yes.
What is it with the bureaucracy?
I think there needs to be an independent investigation. I mean, we've taken it. We've written 16 stories on this. The Democrats kind of control the city right now. I don't think anybody's willing to really do a deep dive into how deep this is. A lot of the nonprofits and government, a lot of nonprofits now are hooked into major developments where if it's an 80-20, they control the affordable quotient of it, and then the developers can do market,
80% market and 20% not, and that's what they're doing now.
Affordable housing.
Affordable housing, but you never and at
The
their
AMI
idea of
is
affordable
high.
is 30 to 125,000 a year.
Correct.
Right.
That's because it includes counties all the way up.
Westchester.
Westchester, and so many.
Yeah,
the
right.
AMI is so
AMI they call it, right?
affordable
Medium.
for who?
Area medium.
Well, we from our days in time, we know that so many of the poor make, if they have 2 cents in their pocket, that's a lot of money.
Right.
Right.
Sure don't have $30,000 a year.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, I think that it needs to be looked at on a deeper level. Just to be, I don't think government should be helping create gentrification. I don't think government should be taking people's properties. I think there's something illegal about it.
I think the other part to add to that is that it needs to go deeper, but I think they're also scared. What happens if we're at the tip of the iceberg? We found these 4 homes, but on the other rounds, what other homes have been seized the same way in error? And they could be 3-4 years
and the person
ago.
couldn't fight with an elderly person.
Exactly.
They could take away a home from an elderly person.
Exactly.
Who's maybe in a, dying in a.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's what
and
we're
is never
finding.
seen again, and then the
Yeah.
city gets their house.
Yep.
When it should have been their heirs.
Exactly. And
Right.
we're finding now people from previous rounds who say they took the home from my mom when she passed, when she died, and it was supposed to go to me, and now it's been 2-3 years and they haven't been able, they weren't able to get the right resources going to fight the bureaucracy, because it's not just fighting the mayor, it's fighting all these agencies. It takes not only time but money.
And they don't believe you when you go in there.
Right.
And you tell them this. They say,
Right.
what do you have to show them?
Oh, no, the funny part is that's where they really get you, is they'll be like, show me the deed of your house, show me when you bought it, and they claim that that's the way that you show them proof. But then they take copies of all these documents that you shouldn't have to show them. So now they have the deed to your house, a copy of the deed to your house, when you bought it, how much you bought it for, who owns it, kind of all this information, back information on the ownership of the home or the property, when they really didn't need all that information.
Right. And that goes into the government database.
Exactly.
And we have no idea what they. It's like
Exactly.
Facebook getting all this information.
Exactly. We don't know what they do with that.
And social planning. And
Exactly.
And the other thing that needs to be looked at is that's the legislative and executive branch of government, but somebody has to kind of look at the judicial branch too, because the way the state court system is, particularly in the county level, and I understand this happening in the Bronx.
We just have 10 seconds.
In Manhattan. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's happening in the judges, and we should look at the judges in this case. And it's
Yeah.
happening in other counties. This could be happening to you in Manhattan, parts of Manhattan, in Bronx, Queens, Staten Island. Who knows? All right, guys, tell us about your site.
Oh, Kings County Politics. We also have a sister site, Queens County Politics. You can go on
And
there.
we're starting New York County
What is it?
Politics, Manhattan.
KCP.
KCP. So kingscountypolitics.com. We also have queenscountypolitics.com. We're looking to start also in Manhattan, so it'd be New York County Politics. We cover the people, the places, and the politics that govern local government. That includes the Attorney General, the Governor, the Mayor, the Public Advocate, the City Council members, state senators, Assembly members, and kind of all the other players along the way, and congressional members as well.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot.
Thank you,
Thank
Paul.
you.
Great. All right, that's it.